That spice in your cabinet isn't fresh anymore. Packaged for price, not for potency. I spent 2 weeks investigating what's actually in America's spice supply. What I found made me throw jars in the trash. In the next 15 minutes, I'm exposing exactly which spice brands are lying to you. The ones prioritizing shelf life over freshness, the ones grinding spices months before you buy them, and the real spice options that still smell like they should. By the end, you'll know exactly which jars to avoid, and the single test that separates real spice from stale powder. Let's start with the biggest spice villains at your local grocery. Brand number 1, McCormick. Founded in 1889, McCormick is not just a spice brand. It's a fixture. It's sold in virtually every major grocery chain in the United States. Walmart, Target, Kroger, Safeway. Generations have grown up with the same red cap in the same cabinet. When I picked up their ground cinnamon, it felt familiar in my hand. Lightweight, uniform, reassuring. Then I opened it. The smell was faint. Sweet, yes, but distant. I had to bring it right up to my nose. Fresh cinnamon should announce itself. This one waited quietly. That was my first red flag. McCormick operates on a global industrial scale, sourcing spices from dozens of countries at the same time. That scale makes consistency possible, but it also makes freshness almost impossible. Cinnamon is harvested, dried, shipped, ground in centralized facilities, packaged, stored in warehouses, distributed again, and finally placed on a shelf. That journey often takes many months. Here's the detail most people never see. McCormick does not print a grind date. Instead, it prints an expiration date often 2 to 3 years into the future. That date implies freshness. But scientifically, it only marks the point when the spice becomes virtually flavorless, not when it stopped being fresh. Volatile oils, the compounds responsible for aroma and much of the functional value, begin evaporating immediately after grinding. After a few months, a significant portion is already gone. The health impact here isn't dramatic or acute. It's cumulative. When spices are weak, people compensate. They add more salt, more sugar, more volume. The natural compounds that once supported digestion and metabolic balance are diluted, while flavor comes from elsewhere. Brand number 2, great value, Walmart's private label. I picked up their black pepper next. The price was impossible to ignore, about $2 for a large container. That number tells a story before you even open it. At that price point, the pepper is sourced as a bulk agricultural commodity, ground in industrial facilities, packaged under contract, and stored until distribution allows it to move. Estimates for this type of supply chain often exceed 6 months from grinding to shelf. When I twisted the lid open, there was almost no smell. Pepper should be sharp. It should bite the air. This didn't. I poured some into my palm. It looked right. It tasted dull. The compound that gives pepper its heat, piperine, degrades over time once the pepper is ground. What remains is pepper-colored dust. Again, this isn't about safety violations. It's about expectation. The low price isn't a bargain. It's a confession. Fresh pepper costs more because it moves faster. Old pepper is cheap because it sits still. The next 2 brands made that impossible to ignore. Brand number 3, Badia. Badia shows up everywhere, especially in Latin American and Caribbean kitchens. Walk into almost any supermarket and you'll see an entire section of their jars, bright colors, bold lettering, dozens and dozens of options. And that's the first number that matters here. Hundreds of SKUs. When a brand offers that many different spices and blends, not all of them move quickly. Some sell every week, others sit. And when ground spices sit, they quietly lose what made them valuable in the first place. I focused on paprika because it's one of the easiest tells. Paprika is made from dried peppers that contain aromatic oils. Those oils are fragile once the peppers are ground. The fresh paprika should smell sweet, warm, even slightly smoky. When I opened the Badia jar, the color was perfect bright red, finely milled, but the aroma was barely there. That contrast matters. Pigments that give paprika its red color are far more stable than volatile aromatic compounds. In simple terms, color survives longer than flavor, so a spice can look vibrant long after its functional compounds have faded. What you're left with is visual impact without sensory depth. From a health perspective, the issue again isn't toxicity, it's dilution. Paprika contains natural compounds that support digestion and antioxidant balance. When those compounds degrade, the spice becomes mostly inert. People compensate by adding more volume or layering other seasonings to chase flavor that should have been there to begin with. Brand number 4, Simply Organic. This one required more care. Simply Organic carries certifications that matter. Organic farming reduces pesticide exposure for farmers and ecosystems. That part is real, but organic certification does not measure freshness. And that distinction is where confusion creeps in. Simply organic is part of a large national distribution system. The spices are sourced from around the world, shipped to centralized facilities, ground in bulk, packaged, and sent through retail networks across the country. The timeline here mirrors conventional brands. The difference is the farming method, not the clock. I looked closely at turmeric. Turmeric's defining compound, curcumin, is relatively stable compared to some volatile oils, but it still degrades over time, especially after grinding. Studies show noticeable declines in aromatic intensity and functional compounds within months, not years. Yet the jar in my hand listed an expiration date far into the future, giving the impression of long-term potency. The price is higher, sometimes 30 to 50% more than conventional spices. Many consumers assume that premium buys freshness. In this case, it buys better inputs at the farm level, but the same industrial processing afterward. The turmeric smelled clean, but muted. It didn't stain the air the way fresh turmeric should. The violation here isn't regulatory, it's conceptual. Organic has become a stand-in for better in every way, even when the supply chain tells a different story. From a health standpoint, the risk is subtle but real. People trust the label, keep the spice longer, and assume they're getting functional benefits that time has already taken away. By the third phase, I stopped asking whether these spices were bad. That question was too simple. The real question had become more uncomfortable. How much age are we being asked to ignore? The next two brands sit right at the line where trust feels justified, and that's what makes them important. Brand number 5, 365 by Whole Foods Market. Whole Foods built its reputation on quality, cleaner labels, higher standards. So when I picked up a jar of 365 ground cumin, I expected something noticeably different. And to be fair, there was a difference. When I opened the jar, the aroma was present, earthy, warm, stronger than bargain brands, but it still didn't fill the room, even with better sourcing and faster shelf turnover. 365 is still a national private label brand serving hundreds of stores. That scale requires centralized grinding and regional distribution. The cumin in my hand had already traveled through multiple facilities before it reached the shelf. Estimates for this type of logistics still land in the multi-month range, not weeks. Whole Foods customers tend to buy spices more frequently, which improves turnover. That matters. Faster turnover means less time degrading, but it doesn't reset the clock. Volatile oils in cumin, particularly those responsible for its warm, nutty aroma, begin to evaporate soon after grinding. Even under ideal conditions, potency drops noticeably within 3 to 6 months. Health-wise, this matters because cumin is often used for digestive support. As aromatic compounds degrade, that functional role weakens. People add more. You're chasing an effect that time has already eroded. It's not harmful, but it's inefficient, and it quietly reshapes how we season food. Brand number 6, Frontier Co-op. It's a member-owned cooperative founded in 1976, built around ethical sourcing, fair pay, and transparency. They publish sourcing details. They talk openly about farmer relationships. That level of openness is rare in the spice industry, but transparency doesn't slow chemistry. Once the coriander seeds arrive at Frontier's facilities, they are ground in bulk and distributed nationwide. Even with strong ethics, the logistics still involve storage, transport, and retail timelines that stretch into months. I opened their ground coriander expecting more. The aroma was clean, but restrained. Coriander's citrusy top notes are among the most volatile. They fade faster than deeper. Heavier aromas. Within a few months of grinding, much of that brightness is gone. What remains is a softer, flatter profile. From a health perspective, coriander's gentle digestive and anti-inflammatory properties are closely tied to those volatile compounds. As they dissipate, the spice becomes nutritionally quieter. What connects these two brands is compromise. One compromises with scale to reach more people. The other compromises with time to uphold ethics. Neither is doing something wrong, but neither can escape the same truth. Once ground, spices are on a countdown. After weeks of opening jars that barely spoke back, I needed to know whether this silence was inevitable, whether industrial spice had erased freshness completely, or whether it was still possible to buy spices that behaved like food instead of shelf decor. That search led me to two brands that don't try to stretch spices across years. They organize their entire system around one idea: time should be visible. The first was Diaspora Co. The difference shows up before you even open the jar. Instead of an expiration date set years in the future, there's a harvest date. A real moment, a real season, a signal that the spice inside once belonged to a field, not a factory line. Diaspora works with single-origin farms, mostly in India, and ships spices shortly after harvest. No blending to erase variation, no bulk buying to pad inventory. When I opened their turmeric, the color stopped me. It wasn't dull yellow, it was bright, almost electric orange. Fresh turmeric carries higher curcumin levels, and curcumin degrades steadily after grinding. Here, the aroma was sharp and immediate. It didn't need encouragement. It filled the space on its own. The supply chain tells the real story. Instead of spices sitting in warehouses for 6 to 9 months, Diaspora moves product through in weeks. Farmers are paid 3 to 6 times the commodity rate, which removes the pressure to overproduce and warehouse old stock. When spices are potent, people use less. Flavor arrives earlier. Meals feel complete without compensation. The body isn't overwhelmed by salt or sugar added to chase what time already took away. The second brand was Burlap and Barrel. If Diaspora emphasizes harvest transparency, Burlap and Barrel emphasizes batch reality. They work directly with farmers and buy limited quantities. When a batch sells out, it disappears. They don't backfill with older commodity stock just to keep shelves full. They wait for the next harvest. I tested their cinnamon. Before opening the jar, I could already smell it through the seal. Once opened, it didn't whisper. It took over the room. Sweet, complex, layered. This cinnamon came from a specific farm, harvested that season, and moved through a supply chain measured in weeks, not quarters. What stood out most was inconsistency in the best way. Cinnamon from Vietnam tasted different than cinnamon from Indonesia. Industrial brands blend those differences away to maintain uniformity. Burlap and Barrel keeps them intact. That variation is the proof. Standardization hides age. Difference reveals freshness. Again, the benefit isn't medical, it's practical. When spices still contain their volatile oils and polyphenols, food reaches satisfaction faster. Portions stabilize. Cooking feels responsive again instead of corrective. Fawn numb. By this point, the pattern is impossible to unsee. Nothing here was about danger labels or recalls. It was about time, quietly edited out of the conversation. The system taught us to ask the wrong question. We were trained to ask whether a spice is still allowed. We were never encouraged to ask whether it's still alive. So the shift starts there. Stop looking at the expiration date first. That date only tells you when a spice becomes officially useless, not when it stopped being valuable. Instead, ask how long it's been since the spice was ground. If that information isn't available, assume the answer is measured in months, not weeks. Large jars feel economical, but volume is a trap when time is the enemy. Ground spices don't fail all at once. They fade. Buying more than you can use in a short window almost guarantees that the last half of the container will be a shadow of the first. Smaller quantities, even at a higher price per ounce, often deliver more real flavor over time. Then there's form. Whole spices are not a trend. They're a workaround. Seeds, bark, and berries protect their volatile oils far longer than powders ever can. Whole peppercorns can retain potency for years. Ground pepper begins losing its edge in weeks. That difference alone explains why freshly ground spice can change an entire dish without increasing quantity. When you open a jar, does the aroma move toward you, or do you have to chase it? It fills the space. If you find yourself shaking, tapping, adding more and more just to get a hint of flavor, that's not your cooking. That's chemistry catching up to time. There's also a psychological reset that has to happen. Many of us learn to cook by correcting food, adding salt, sugar, fat, acid, because the base ingredients felt incomplete. Fresh spices change that dynamic. Flavor arrives earlier. Food stabilizes sooner. You stop layering fixes on top of absence. This isn't about perfection. Not everyone has access to specialty spice shops or seasonal sourcing. The goal isn't purity, it's awareness. Even switching 1 or 2 core spices, pepper, cinnamon, cumin, can recalibrate your sense of what food is supposed to smell and taste like. And once that recalibration happens, something subtle shifts. You waste less. You overseason less. You trust your senses again. Cooking becomes responsive instead of compensatory. So here's the real takeaway. If a spice doesn't speak when you open it, that's information. Listen to it. Check your cabinet. Smell what you own. Notice what's quiet. And next time you buy, choose the option that hasn't been waiting the longest to be noticed.